This streaming event brought to you by admin.
To establish a quorum, will the agenda clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Sharoma.
Present.
Commissioner Guzman Aceves.
Here.
Commissioner Randolph.
Here.
Commissioner Redshaw.
Present.
President Batjer.
Here. Thank you. A quorum has been established. Welcome to the California Public Utilities Commission. I am calling this meeting of August 31st, 2020, Public Agenda Number 3469 to order. Due to the coronavirus pandemic and the shelter-in-place order, we are conducting today's business meeting online and by remote participation. The meeting is live streamed on the CPUC's website. You can view the meeting at www.adminmonitor.com/ca/CPUC. The public engagement is critical to the CPUC process. If you wish to make a public comment, please dial into 800-857-1917 and enter passcode 9899501 and press *1. You will be placed into a queue and the operator will take your name and organization. You will be called upon to speak when we get to the public comment period in today's agenda. If you encounter difficulty calling into the public telephone line, please email votingmeetinghelp, all one word, votingmeetinghelp @cpuc.ca.gov or call us at 415-703-1496. Email comments received will be distributed to the commissioners and senior management. CPUC rules do not allow for parties in proceedings to speak about open proceedings. The public can make comments addressing items on the regular agenda and including items not on the agenda today. Please note that there will not be public comment on any item on the closed session agenda. You will have 2 minutes to speak. 2 minutes. With that guidance in mind, I welcome today's speaker, and I will now turn to the operator to open the public comment telephone lines. Operator?
The first comment is from Jeff Moyer. Your line is now open.
I'm calling in support of Dr. Stebbins. She has been a great advocate for people with disabilities. We are in great danger in this fire season, all fire seasons, with our many people's requirement for ventilators or other devices that ensure life. And this is a matter of life and death. Dr. Stebbins has been our great advocate, and I urge you, plead with you, to keep her on staff. You need her. We need her.
Thank you, caller. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Kathy Chapin. Your line is now open.
Thank you. My name is Kathy Chapin. I'm a retired state employee. I was a fiscal branch chief at the Air Resources Board from 2010 to 2014. I was responsible for budgets and accounting. My comments support the commission in the firing of Alice Stebbins. Alice was hired to replace the existing division administrative chief. Gradually, Alice started hiring people from the water board, where she had been, into positions at ARB, the same people that were hired at the PUC. Following his information that she had done the same things that were found in the SPB report at ARB. In order to hire more of the people that she had previous working relationships, regardless if they had experience, Alice decided that I and others needed to be forced out. I happened to be the first one she targeted. Alice had hired a consultant to do an evaluation of the Administrative Services Division. The initial version showed a significant problem in accounting partly due to the fact that they did not have enough positions for the workload. After I was instrumental in securing more positions in the accounting branch via the budget change proposal process, Alice decided to remove accounting from my responsibility. She did this to promote the accounting manager 2 to an accounting manager 3. This person was the same person that was hired to become the PUC's administrative chief. In order to support this promotion, she had the consultant change the final version to state that accounting needed it to be its own branch. I currently have both versions of the report. After a time, the budget office was also removed from my responsibility. I was put on a special assignment. During the special assignment, staff were told not to talk to me, so I was also isolated. It was an assignment that was more appropriate for the associate level. When I asked Alice what I was going to do after the assignment was done, she responded that she did not know. I also asked what I had done to deserve this treatment, and she said nothing. I have a chronic illness, which Alice knows about. It did not deter her from bullying and harassing me, which resulted in my chronic disease accelerating. I eventually left the Air Board, hoping that the bullying and harassment of other staff would stop. It did not. Slowly, Alice forced out many more highly qualified people, all to be replaced by the people who she deemed loyal to her, those same people that she took to the PUC. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments to this matter.
Thank you, caller. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Pauline DeLille. Your line is now open.
Hello, this is Holland DeLille, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak today. What I think should be on your agenda today, and certainly on the next one, is the restructuring of the CPUC. That for some reason, the CPUC has been allowed for decades to put the interest of the utilities and the other entities that they oversee first, above the interest of the public, shows there's a deep, deep flaw in this system. That the CPUC has failed to collect more than $200 million worth of fees, that they blatantly violated the Bagley-Keene Act by holding secret conferences about the firing of Ms. Stebbins. Those alone are enough to show that there's something really wrong, and we need a legislative committee with public input to redesign the CPUC so this kind of abuse can't happen again. And we're talking about abuse to the extreme, where hundreds of people have been killed by the utilities that the CPUC is supposed to oversee. And billions of dollars of damage to properties has happened because of PG&E, one of the utilities they oversee, which by record has over 89 felonies because of their neglect, because of putting their profit first and safety last. They failed over many years to maintain the lines. They could have been putting the lines underground. They should certainly have maintained them. They could have built microgrids so that when a maintenance is due, a vast area doesn't have to be shut off, but only a small area for a short period of time. Because every time they fail by maintenance and having to shut off power, and every time there is a power shut off for an emergency, people with disabilities are endangered and some people die. Some people rely upon power to live. Now, the supposed grant program, the SGIP, is a joke. In order to qualify, one has to be wealthy enough to buy a battery backup system and then wait for over a year for a rebate. That doesn't help people with disabilities because most of us are low income. I don't know, are you signaling that as I run out of time? Of
that's
course,
a 2-minute signal. Yes, Ms. DeLille, that's a 2-minute signal.
The minute signal? I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
That's the 2-minute signal.
Okay. So, may I say more, or is my time up?
Your time is up. You can finish if you'd like, but your time is up. You can finish your statement, but your time is up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And my statement is there's some deep, deep flaws, and we need to restructure the CPUC entirely because this should not happen, that you have the opportunity even to put monetary interest above the public good. Thank you.
Thank you. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Bernard Azevedo. Your line is now open.
Hello, commissioners and all attending. My name is Bernard Azevedo. I am the former Deputy Executive Director of Administrative Services at the CPUC. The CPUC now has forced my demotion and returned me to the California Air Resources Board. I'm here today to tell you how I and my boss, Executive Director Alice Stebbins, discovered and reported the $200 million in accounts receivable and brought it to the attention of the commissioners. In early 2020, I reported to Ms. Stebbins and the CPUC had $200 million in uncollected accounts receivables. At $200 million, I was very concerned the CPUC was in violation of the government regulations when reporting to the state controller. In fact, I found that nearly $50 million was several years past due, and $23 million was probably completely uncollectible. On May 15th of 2020, I wrote President Batjer as leader of the Internal Audit Committee and expressed my concerns with the approach to risk analysis Internal Audits was using. My concerns were disregarded. However, within a matter of less than 3 months of this second whistleblowing, President Batjer placed me on administrative leave, and she and the other commissioners had made it clear to Ms. Stebbins that she would be fired. What does this mean to the general public? In many cases, the CPUC does not know who owes the money and for how long. President Batjer doesn't collect from the companies fined, allowing them to be scofflaws to the CPUC's decisions. President Batjer is willing to raise fees on ratepayers rather than collect the money already owed. President Batjer hires people who blow the whistle to deflect attention from her own misconduct. Don't forget that Commissioner Rechtschaffen led the commission in the forgiveness of $200 million by PG&E on a penalty this year. I think the commissioners know exactly why there are millions of dollars in uncollected accounts receivable. The commissioners have been here a long time, while Alice and I have been at the PUC for just a short time. I think it is obvious that commissioners care more about the utilities than the ratepayers. As a taxpayer and an ethical state employee, I find it unconscionable. Yet, on Monday, August 10th, I was relieved of my position, and Ms. Stebbins has been told she will be fired. This is how President Batjer and the CPUC treats whistleblowers.
Okay. Thank you. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Lucien Filler. Your line is now open.
Greetings, Commissioner. For the record, my name is Lucien Filler, a Deputy Executive Director in Communications and Water Division. I'm concerned against House 7.
Lucien, excuse me. We can't hear you very well. Can you speak more directly into your mic? Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Sorry. Greetings, Commissioner. For the record, my name is Lucian Feller, the CPUC Deputy Executive Director of Communications and Water Division. I'm here as a concerned employee about the action that is being taken against Alice Stebbins today. Since I am alluded to in the SPB report, I want to set the record straight. The SPB investigation has the facts wrong. I came from the Department of Water Resources and not the State Water Resources Control Board. At this time, I'd like to highlight a few of the problematic programs that I have found since my arrival at the CPUC. First, the Lifeline program is fraught with issues such as $60 million in accruals that roll over year after year without knowing which companies have not paid. Another is the transition to a new third-party program administrator, which was failing and caused more than $10 million in cost overruns. Next, this Deaf and Disabled Telecommunications Program, DDTP. An independent assessment was done after numerous issues emerged, highlighting the need for change. The situation is so bad that the auditor was unable to determine the fiscal impact to the state and taxpayers. Again, the cost to ratepayers, while unknown, was suspected to be sizable in a program of $55 million. Lastly, the Water Division. A recent independent assessment of the Water Division found it has never issued an enforcement action against any utility it regulates and has accounts receivable dating back over 15 years. This has allowed utilities to collect from ratepayers, not send money to the PUC as required. The Water Division's method for tracking and certifying water utility compliance continues to place the CPUC at risk. My questions are and concerns are, why have you allowed these conditions to persist since you took your positions? And why are you so adamant about removing Director Stebbins and the operational standards, procedures, and audits she's put in place while you allow utilities to owe millions and forgive penalties of millions of dollars to? Thank you.
Thank you. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Richard Staff. Your line is now open.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Yes.
Thank you.
We can hear.
Thank you. First, it's very interesting, President Batjer and commissioners, that Ms. Stebbins is being accused of nepotism and illegal hirings. Yet in November of 2018, when Ms. Stebbins first started with the CPUC, or close to when she first started, she and her staff were developing a nepotism policy, something your fellow commissioners had never asked previous executive directors to create. President Batjer, you received, as did the other commissioners, an email from me talking about the history I've had and others have had with you as the chair of the Building Standards Commission. There seems to be a history with you, President Batjer, of your direct and strong connection to those with large bank accounts, large industry, very powerful folks, and coming to the CPUC, you now have apparently a very strong and good relationship with the leadership at PG&E and other utilities you are supposed to be overseeing and assuring they do their job, and you're not. I've read the report from the State Personnel Board. You, in fact, President Batjer, I believe, as secretary in your previous role with the state, oversaw the State Personnel Board. You were appointed by Governor Schwarzenegger as secretary, and as such, you oversaw, as one of the state agencies, the Personnel Board. Who were the people that did the investigation of Ms. Stebbins? I would like to finish, ma'am. What has been your relationship with PG&E and the other utilities, including AT&T, who have no backup power to their cell towers? So people with disabilities and vulnerable seniors are unable to make a cell phone call when the electric utilities you've allowed to de-energize their grids does that. Those of us that have an emergency are unable to make those emergency 911 calls. I specifically am presently asking the state attorney general and the state legislature to investigate you, President Batjer, and commissioners. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Erica Shahal. Your line is now open.
Thank you. I'm getting a reverberation here.
Yeah, we are too. Robert, is there a way?
How is this? Does this sound better?
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you. Much better.
Well, okay. I have been following the PUC since my husband did stories in your commission when he was a journalist in San Francisco, and I have to say it doesn't seem like much has changed. Right now, I'm calling in support of Alice Stebbins and to plead with you not to fire her. She's been the only member of your commission to support the elderly and disabled communities in California. The proposed firing appears to be retaliatory, as Stebbins has uncovered the commission's dereliction of duty as you have allowed $200 million in fees owed to stand uncollected. And you've also abandoned our most vulnerable populations, allowing rolling blackouts and brownouts, depriving those communities of electricity that is vital to their survival, and not providing adequate financial assistance for backup electrical sources. I think that the firing of Alice Stebbins ultimately is just another black eye for your commission, starting with the explosion in San Bruno, continuing through our cycle of horrific fires, which are greatly exacerbated by the lack of maintenance that PUC continually does not do. As a footnote, I'm a part owner of a mobile home park in Southern California, and 106 of our residents lost their homes in the Rice Canyon fire. I've experienced the absolutely catastrophic results of lack of maintenance, and it's an absolute tragedy. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Tyler Maderi. Your line is now open.
Great, thank you. Yes, my name is Tyler Maderi, and I am the District Director for Senator Richard Roth, who represents Western Riverside County. I speak today on behalf of the Senator. While he would like to have addressed you personally, he cannot today, as today is the last day of the legislative session. Senator Roth wants to provide a character reference for Ms. Alice Stebbins. Alice was instrumental in working with the City and County of Riverside in securing a $413 million vehicle emissions testing lab being built in Riverside. This 380,000 square foot facility will be one of the largest and most advanced vehicle emissions testing and research facilities in the world. It also has the largest net zero energy structure of its type in the nation. Alice worked tirelessly and was a great partner to the City of Riverside, county staff, as well as UC Riverside staff in ensuring that the project was successful. The lab is currently on budget and scheduled to be completed by early 2021. Senator Roth cannot emphasize enough how impressed he was with Alice's efforts. Alice worked long and hard to meet deadlines and to provide exceptional leadership. Alice established outstanding working relationships with the Riverside team, which was instrumental in making the world-class laboratory a reality. The successful construction project is now nearing completion. Alice's integrity is unquestionable, and she is committed to excellence and holds everyone around her accountable. While Senator Roth cannot speak to the detail of the personnel matters before you today, he has great confidence in Ms. Stebbins' character and her ability to exceed all expectations if given the opportunity. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, caller. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Devin White. Your line is now open.
Good morning.
We can't hear you. You could speak directly into your mic, please.
The next caller is Zach Karnazes. Your line is now open.
Hi, my name is Zach Carnazes. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I am a disabled resident in San Francisco, journalist and community organizer. And I'd really like to talk about a number of things. I, first of all, though, can't even get to them because of the accessibility problems that you have with your meetings here. I call in to public meetings on an almost weekly basis on the local and state level. This is by far the least accessible, most problematic ability to participate in a public process of public comment I've ever come across, ever, in any public body. You should be ashamed of yourselves. I cannot get your office to provide the ADA coordinator that I could email and talk with directly to find out what disability accommodations are available. When we call into these meetings, we have to give our full name and organization and spell it out over the phone. That's really hard for people with disabilities that have speech disabilities, like one person from our disabled community that wanted to call in today, was not granted an accommodation to call in, and has to go through this phone system, which is only in English. And we're supposed to be able to leave public comment anonymously, and yet the system doesn't even inform us that we have that right. Additionally, I emailed weeks ago. My emails were ignored up until, I kid you not, 50 minutes ago. I got an email reply for emails I've been sending for weeks trying to fix these issues. All of them except for one have been completely ignored. I also made them mention that there is very non-existent information for non-English speakers to attend this body and to have translation services. I was redirected to a website that says if specialized accommodations are needed, such as non-English or sign language interpreters, contact this email, which is not an ADA email. It is not an email specifically set up for accessibility. It is a general mailbox that gives an automated reply, which is very confusing. And that message is only in English. So if English is your second language and you're trying to attend these meetings, you have no way of knowing how to do so because that message is only in English. Additionally, it says at least 5 business days in advance of the remote meeting. I've never heard of an accommodation requiring 5 days of advance notice. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, in some cases, your agendas haven't even been published 5 days in advance. So there are a slew of accessibility problems, and Michelle Cook is the only person that's responded to me over email and, again, ignored most of these complaints. I brought many of these up on August 17th at your meeting, and they've been completely ignored. I also called the phone number for people that have issues with this passcode, and difficulty accessing this meeting. There's a phone number, which I was hopeful that was provided, this 415-703-1496. I called that today, right during, the beginning of public comment of this meeting to hopefully be patched through and not have to struggle with your passcode system. And it just goes to a mailbox. No one's even answering it right now. How can you have a public meeting like this? I also requested the video footage of the August 17th meeting, and that's never even been provided. The public records request was totally ignored. It wasn't even filed until 50 minutes ago. I requested it on August 17th. So I don't know. I mean, I hear about all the corruption. I hear about this missing $200 million. I hear about the illegal firing of Alice Stebbins and these closed sessions and the being in the pocket of PG&E and not upkeeping our power lines and doing this oversight. And you know what? I don't doubt it for a second because I see how you operate these meetings. I see these meetings are not even free of corruption and major oversight problems. I mean, if you can't host a public meeting to be accessible and actually comply with California and federal law, then of course, when it comes to moneyed interests and people that you're supposed to be collecting money from, I could absolutely see you not doing your job with that. And it's just appalling to me that these barriers to access are in place, and we're trying to disabled people are just trying to speak up, and so that we can have a say in public government. And I look at this.
I apologize.
Batjer isn't even looking at the camera. She's looking away. from the camera for almost the entire meeting. Doesn't even look like she's looking or paying attention at all. And I wonder, you have the California state behind you, the great seal of the state of California, and you have the American flag there. And I wonder if you know what those really stand for. Thank you for your time.
Operator, your next caller, please.
The next caller is Connie Arnold. Your line is now open.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak. The PSC commissioners have continued to put forth for-profit utility industry profits above ratepayers and human life. CPUC commissioner's idea of good management is to get rid of a longtime public official, Alice Stebbins, executive director of the CPUC, who has found $200 million in unpaid fees due to CUP and ratepayers, taxpayers, and homeowners that could be refunded to offset state coffers for money that was owed by utility companies. Instead of giving Ms. Stebbins a bonus, you want to give her a pink slip and have her and her staff furloughed during a very dire wildfire season when she is needed by the public most. It's wrong for the PUC commissioners to fire Alice Stebbins, executive director, who is a qualified, capable, caring, and competent public official operating in the public interest. Why aren't the PUC commissioners trying to collect the $200 million in funds that Alice Stebbins found that is owed to the state of California ratepayers, which will be used for benefit of the public and ratepayers? Why are you holding PG&E electric utility companies you have oversight over accountable? Why aren't you holding them accountable? It's interesting. I found an article where a unanimous vote by the CPUC allowed you to grant a waiver of those fees, the $200 million that obviously must have been the amount that Alice Stebbins had found, so that isn't going to get collected, which is ridiculous. Why aren't you instead doing your job to fulfill your role as public officials with clear oversight over private for-profit electric utility companies who never maintain equipment and electric grids to prevent power outages and ravaging wildfires? We are aware that Ms. Stebbins' attorney has requested each PUC commissioner to produce emails and text messages on their phones on the firing of Alice Stebbins and communications with PG&E and AT&T. And we'd like to know what kind of communications you've had with a convicted felon, PG&E, who had 85 felony convictions for causing the deaths of Californians to date in the recent wildfires. At the last PUC meeting, there were commenters on the phone who weren't able to comment. And also, I note that there were articles, and I did send an email today, that in 2003, Governor Art Schwarzenegger appointed Marybel Batjer cabinet secretary in charge of running day-to-day operations, and then that became a conflict of interest controversy for her in her role, and it was rumored she was on her way out in October of 2004. And so moving on to Caesars, and at Caesars, there was evidence of corruption of demanding employees vote for Harry Reid for the Senate. And then emails were sent out according to articles I read. CPUC commissioners continue to abdicate themselves from their role and responsibility to the public ratepayers, homeowners, and taxpayers for failure to collect owed funds, failure to ensure repairs to the aging electric utility infrastructure and grid networks, failure to protect the public from wildfires or power shutoffs. The CPUC continuing the protectionism of electric utility companies like PG&E, who has 85 felony convictions for causing the deaths of Californians in the deadly 2018 campfires that destroyed the town of Paradise, California, is wrong. CPUC commissioners are instead focused on firing Alice Stebbins, executive director of the CPUC, for any reason they can get away with justifying. She's worked tirelessly on numerous problems associated with utility wildfire mitigation measures associated with electric utility de-energization events, PSPS events, and ongoing problems faced by ratepayers, including vulnerable senior. And I have a question about why, at this time, you're doing everything in your power to get rid of a good public employee and not retain her. There are other options, and I think it's a bogus, trumped-up charge to say that she mishandled the hiring of 17 people when she's hired over 400 and hundreds of others.
Ms. Arnold, I'm sorry, but your time, you're well over your 2-minute time, and the bell's rung a couple or 3 times. So.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for the opportunity, but I'm mad, and I want the CPUC commissioners investigated for not doing her job, and I would like Alice Stebbins to be retained as executive director of the CPUC. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Socorro Watkins. Your line is now open.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Socorro Watkins. I worked at the Air Resources Board, ARB, for 34 years. I served as the Chief of Business Management Branch from 2005 to 2016. Alice Stebbins came from the Water Board to ARB around 2011 when she was appointed Chief of the Administrative Services Division, ASD. I reported directly to her for 5 years. Now, I have reviewed the State Personnel Board report, which revealed an abundant number of illegal, inappropriate hires. I am testifying today to reassure PUC that what is stated in the report is true. I witnessed the same actions to benefit the same people at ARB. Since my time with you today is limited, I can only share a few similar instances, but there are many more. I will begin with how Alice took actions to benefit Bernard Azevedo, or David as he called himself then. David was hired at ARB as the manager of the accounting section. Shortly after his arrival, Alice built up the accounting section and moved it from the fiscal branch and into its own branch and appointed David as the chief of the accounting section. When the branch chief of the fiscal branch left, because she was forced out by Alice, there were not enough duties left to support an SSM3 position. Alice moved the contract section from my branch into the fiscal branch so that the position would support that classification. This branch chief position was given to Pam Biggin. Pam, like David, came from the Water Board and was also promoted to an SSM3 position. Later, I had an opening for an SSM2 section manager position. Monica Torres applied and was interviewed but ranked third. Alice changed the hiring procedures and had the other 3 ASD branch chiefs, which 2 of them were David and Pam, included in the second round of interviews. They rated their friend Monica, also from the Water Board, as the top candidate, and I felt pressure to hire her. In 2016, I retired and left ARB due to the harassment from Alice and other members of the team. I have heard a few folks saying not to fire Alice because she is doing a good job at PUC. She might be, but it does not excuse the inappropriate, illegal hires. If the Air Resources Board Executive Office had listened to the numerous complaints brought forward about Alice and her friends, your commission would not be in the situation today. She has repeated this behavior of hiring and promoting her friends.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, you're going to have to bring your remarks to a close. You're over your 2 minutes.
Okay. She has repeated this behavior of hiring and promoting her friends to positions where they had little to no experience, cheating others who were more highly qualified for these positions. You have the opportunity to stop this from happening again. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Operator, the next caller, please.
I'm currently showing no further callers.
Okay, we'll wait a minute to make sure everyone's been able to call in. Operator, is there anybody else on the line, please?
Yes, the next caller is Richard Staff. Your line is now open.
President Batjer and Commissioners, I will this time only take 2 minutes or less to say how appalling it is that the 5 of you that are responsible to protect ratepayers from abuses by the for-profit utilities of all types, electric, water, transportation, telephonic. Here we have AT&T, one of the largest telephonic cell phone providers, that has no backup system in place. So when PG&E, that you've allowed to turn off its grid power, does that, we can't call. We, in the disability community years ago, asked you commissioners to please assure that if you were going to give the transportation, private for-profit transportation companies the right to compete with cabs, that they should also be required to provide accessible service. And the commission didn't. You continually have a record of failing to protect not only the most vulnerable in the state of California, but all ratepayers. I'm hopeful Governor Newsom and the state legislature and the Attorney General will look into this and make the decision to replace you with people of honor and integrity and people who will commit to protecting the ratepayer, not to protecting the utilities that they are supposed to be overseeing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Operator, is there anybody else on the line?
The next caller is Jamie Orman. Your line is now open.
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to speak this morning. My name is Jamie Orman. I'm a staff member at the CPUC, and I'm written about in Section 3 of the SPB report. It makes me quite uncomfortable because there's a few facts in that report that are pretty wrong, and I just want to correct the record quickly. First, the document mistakes my experience at the CPUC, which is pretty easy to fact check and ensure is correct in an official public document. And then second, when I applied for and interviewed for the Pro 5 position in the executive director's office, the listing was for a Sacramento position, and I work in San Francisco, and I was never willing to take a Sacramento-based job. I did the interview in order to meet the executive director at the time in the first place and to learn more about the CPUC's decentralization process that was ongoing. Since I was never going to take a Sacramento job, it should have been made clear in that report, or else my candidacy should not have been used in the report at all, because I was never really running for that job, going out for that job. So I just look forward to seeing more regulatory documents published on the record, and we keep moving forward on our former proceedings. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Zach Karnazes. Your line is now open.
Hi, thank you. I just want to state that there are multiple people in the disability community that are not able to leave public comment because of the access barriers imposed by this commission and the lack of an ADA coordinator. That's all I want to say. There are multiple people that are trying to get through and cannot. I just want to let the board know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Operator?
The next caller is Walter Park. Your line is now open.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. First, I'd like to fully endorse the letter from my colleague, Richard Scaff, that lays out the very unhappy history of California's disability community in dealing with President Batjer when she oversaw the Building Standards Commission. We have to remember and we have to learn from that history, but we're not fated to make it our future, and please do not. Today, the CPUC is going to decide whether it's still the old CPUC or whether it has become the new public serving CPUC. The old CPUC had a president who apparently shared $100 bottles of wine over expensive dinners with those whom he supposedly regulated. The old CPUC saw no evil while PG&E underfunded fire protection and safety and backup power for decades. PBS Frontline described that recently with the headline, "Deflect, Delay, and Defer." That's really not worthy of a California institution. The old CPUC required reports on minority and disability services from the TNCs and then allowed Uber to refuse to provide them deadline after deadline, allowing those TNCs to not provide services to people with disabilities while they were killing off the taxi industry, which did have accessible transit. The old CPUC is the one that told PG&E not to worry about that $200 million fine for actions that killed 126 people, mostly people with disabilities and seniors, as you know, in Paradise and in other places, when PG&E filed for bankruptcy. In what way is that different from the parent murderer who pleads for mercy as an orphan? That's a terrible joke, but it's so analogous to what you allowed PG&E to do, to use their bankruptcy caused by their own actions to not pay for a fine resulting from those same actions. The old CPUC made a half-hearted effort to use funds from the existing SGIP program intended for other purposes originally as a fig leaf for continuing backup. And you have heard about how that does not work and is not working. I'd like to make a couple more remarks. There can be and there must be a new CPUC. The disability community wants to go there with you. It can either be this CPUC or an entirely new body. You get to decide that. My community is involved in all this because we cannot live, many of us, without continuous power, without backup power, and without telephone service. When PG&E said just a few weeks ago that we didn't give notice because of that 5-hour blackout was ordered by the ISO, it wasn't a PSPS, we see the old CPUC in action. The new CPUC will be proactive. The new CPUC will regulate. It will levy and enforce and collect fees and fines. It will seek engagement from its constituents. As a member of the disability community, we've had full attention and participation with Alice Stebbins. She is one state staff person who has actually been responsive. She has brought in a new ADA coordinator. That is not revolutionary in most spheres, but perhaps it's revolutionary at the CPUC. I've seen personnel board reports. I cannot know all the details, of course, but I urge you not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you feel our hirings were incorrect in some ways, issue a censure or give additional guidance.
Sir, could you wrap up your comments? You're well over your 2 minutes. If you could just conclude.
Yes, I will. Another sentence or two. Give her guidance, but do not let her go. Then our community has to start all over again. No matter what your decision is, our future, that is the future of the disability and senior communities, is to be with you. We are going to be at your next meeting. We are going to be in your future. We don't go away if Alice goes away. Let's work together. Please do the right thing today and be what you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Holland DeLille. Your line is now open.
Thank you again for this opportunity. I don't know if the commissioners are really getting it, so I'm going to tell you in really stark language that all the lives lost, all the property damage, all of the lives that are put in danger because they rely upon electricity and power, all of that is your doing. The felonies of PG&E are your felonies. You did this. You can't just shrug and say, oh, well, they did it. We didn't have anything to do with it. That's not true. You did it. You murdered. You destroyed. You imperil people. Each and every one of you commissioners, because you don't do your job, because you put the moneyed interest first. That has to stop. Either we have to get rid of every one of you, but I don't think that's going to help enough. There'll just be more corrupt people that come along to fill those positions, we're going to have to restructure the whole CPUC so this kind of corruption can't happen. So stop it. Stop it today. Don't fire the one person that's tried to do her job for the public while you just fill your pockets. Stop it today. Thank you.
Thank you. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Cindy Ross. Your line is now open.
Good morning, Madam President and Commissioners. I'm Cindy Roth, the President of the Greater Riverside Chambers of Commerce, and I'm calling today to speak in reference to my relationship with Dr. Alice Stebbins, the Executive Director of the CPUC. I had the pleasure of meeting and working with Alice Stebbins during the competitive bid process for the relocation of the Air Resources Board El Monte facility. During the competitive process, which was extremely arduous, and they must be held to the highest standards, Alice acted with the utmost professionalism, accountability, and integrity representing the California Air Resources Board. After the decision was made to select Riverside as the relocation site, Alice led the team of not only the Air Resources Board representatives, but with representatives from the city, the county, the University of California, Riverside, and community business leaders. Through her efforts, she built the relationships, partnerships with the community, which has paved the way to bring this project to fruition. Alice's leadership and dedication to the project was exceptional. I'm proud to work with Dr. Alice Stebbins and applaud her character and long-term commitment to the state of California. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Operator, the next caller, please.
The next caller is Mike Aguirre. Your line is now open.
Good morning, my dear friends. Corruption starts with the corruption of the language, as George Orwell said. And an example of that corruption of the language is the pretext that you're using for discharging your executive director. The idea that because she committed venial sins having to do with personnel matters is so shocking to you that she must be removed. But my dear friend, Mr. Roughshaven, after PG&E was found to have killed 84 people, that didn't bother him a bit. And he went ahead and gave them a complete pass, a complete free ride. Now, I know you all are probably calculating, now, what should I do? Should I do the right thing? Should I do the wrong thing? Will I get caught? Will I don't get caught? The Attorney General's in the bag. You know, he's part of the system, so he's not likely to go after me. Maybe Ms. Stebbins will reveal a lot more about what's going on, and the whole thing will unravel. There'll be all kinds of litigation. But the point is, you're all caught in a very difficult situation. And you didn't inherit it. I mean, you inherited it. You didn't create it. President Batjer, you didn't create it, but you stepped into it. And you're allowing yourselves, because of your political ambitions or your financial ambitions, you're allowing yourselves to get sucked into a situation that may very well result in a very serious sanctions coming onto you. Why? Because you're saying that what Alice has done is worthy of her being dismissed, but what you've done are mortal sins, much bigger. Letting PG&E off the hook, continuous ex-party communications, carrying out serial meetings. Remember, a lawsuit's already been filed against you in the First Appellate District Court. You should definitely get with Heracles before you decide how much further you want to go. Good morning, and thank you.
Thank you. Operator, the next caller, please.
I'm showing no further callers at this time.
Okay, thank you, Operator. With no more callers on the line, the public comment period is now closed. There is no agenda changes today. We only have one item on the regular agenda. That's item 1, the consideration of dismissal of the executive director. I will now turn to our general counsel, Heracles Aguilar, to provide some information, and she will act as a moderator. Heracles? We can't hear you, Aracles.
Sorry. Good morning, Ms. Stebbins. As you know, I'm Aracles Aguilar, the General Counsel, and I'm functioning today as a moderator for this public hearing. Please direct any questions you have to me directly during the course of this hearing. Pursuant to California Government Code Section 11126A2, you have requested a public hearing on item number 1, which is the consideration of dismissal of the Executive Director. The public hearing will begin with a commission opening statement, and up to 15 minutes has been allocated for that statement. Next, Ms. Stebbins has been allocated 45 minutes to give her presentation. There will not be a question and answer during this hearing. After the public hearing, the commission will recess and enter into closed session to deliberate on the decision to be reached concerning this matter. This is authorized by California Government Code Section 11126A4. Pursuant to Government Code Sections 11125.2 and 11126.3F, if the Commission takes any action during closed session to dismiss the Executive Director, the Commission will reconvene in public session after meeting prior to closed session, prior to adjournment, and report that a closed session was held. Any action taken and any roll call vote thereon to dismiss a public employee arising out of any closed session of a state body. The Commission will also provide such a report of any action taken and any roll call vote thereon to dismiss a public employee arising out of any closed session of the state body at a subsequent meeting on September 10th, 2020. Ms. Stebbins, do you have any questions before we begin?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now begin with the Commission's opening statement.
Thank you, Aracles. This is President Batjer. The Public Utilities Code authorizes the Commission to choose an Executive Director who holds office at the pleasure of the Commission. This means the Executive Director is an at-will position. In that position, you, Ms. Stebbins, are responsible for the Commission's executive and administrative duties, specifically coordinating, supervising, and directing the operations of the Commission. We are here today to consider your dismissal as Executive Director based on two things: your conduct described in the State Personnel Board investigation report and your conduct after the CPUC received the investigation report. I will discuss the State Personnel Board report first. State Personnel Board is an independent state department created by the California Constitution. I will be referring to it as the SPB. The California Constitution requires that under the state civil service system, all permanent hires and promotions must be based on merit, and that merit must be determined by a competitive examination process. Your job and our job is to uphold those principles in hiring. The State Personnel Board investigation report is a public document that can be found on the SPB website. The report addresses the hiring process regarding 5 people who were to work closely with you. You were directly involved in these processes. The first position is the Administrative Services Division Director position. The Administrative Services Division of the CPUC is responsible for managing the CPUC's finances, facilities, and contracts, including important budgeting functions. In January 2019, the CPUC posted a job opening for this director position, which would be reporting directly to you. The investigation report concluded that you pre-selected the candidate who was ultimately hired into this position. Pre-selected means that you had already made up your mind to hire this person before the recruitment process occurred. The report cited the following facts in support of that conclusion. First, the candidate was less qualified than several other applicants. One of the key duties of the position is to represent the CPUC during the budget process before the legislature. The work experience of the candidate you hired consisted solely of accounting positions. He had no college degree, and his resume and application did not list any experiences with budgets. In contrast, several other applicants had significant fiscal and budget management experience at an executive level, as well as postgraduate degrees and professional certifications. Second, you and the candidate had worked together previously at 2 state agencies for a total of 15 years. You worked together at the Water Resources Control Board for 8 years, and you worked together at the Air Resources Board for 7 years. The report noted that your prior knowledge of this candidate's work in and of itself was not problematic, as long as the hiring process was objectively administered. But the report found that you pre-selected him and did not fairly consider other candidates. Third, you personally participated on the exam scoring panel for this hiring process, along with 2 other people, to rate the 12 applicants by scoring their written applications. After the other raters had completed their scoring independently, you met with them to discuss the ratings they had given. After that discussion, they lowered their scores of the candidates to mirror your scoring in order to rank your preferred pre-selected candidate with the highest scores in the exam, despite the fact that the candidate had less relevant experience and education that several of the other candidates had. One of the raters told the SPB during the investigation that he felt pressured by you to lower other candidates' ratings because you had made it clear who you preferred. Specifically, he stated that when your staff members handed him the application materials for the preferred candidate, they told him, quote, "This is the one." Fourth, the SPB report concluded you influenced the scoring of the interview portion of the process in the same manner as the scoring of the written application materials and unfairly diminished the rights of other well-qualified candidates in violation of the merit principles. The SPB report also found that you made, quote, "misleading and deceptive representations of the duties that this candidate was performing in the position in order to increase the candidate's salary." First, you attempted to offer the candidate a higher salary than was allowed under state rules. When that didn't work, just 4 months after the candidate was in the position, you added additional functions to his position and increased his salary by 49%. After that salary increase was in place, some of those duties were removed, thereby eliminating the justification for the higher salary. When CalHR, the state department that oversees salary setting rules for the state, asked for justification for the salary increase, you falsely claimed that the candidate was still performing some of the duties that had actually been removed from the position. Regarding this one appointment, the SPB report said that your conduct, quote, "paints a picture of a deliberate effort on your part to circumvent civil service rules. It is appalling and disgraceful to engineer the hiring of a marginally qualified former colleague over more qualified candidates, spike the person's pay, and then make false statements attempting to justify the compensation." The SPB report findings regarding the other 4 appointments are similar, and I'm not going to take the time to go into the details regarding those, except to note that the report concluded they were all of, quote, "highly questionable legitimacy," end of quote, and that you were, quote, "at the center of," end of quote, "the conduct that rendered the appointments problematic." I am now going to address your conduct after the CPUC first received a draft of the SPB report on June 12th of this year. As you know, the SPB requested a response from the CPUC regarding the findings in the report. I informed you that while the process was pending, Human Resource Division, which was tasked with responding to the SPB report and ordinarily reports to you, would instead temporarily report to me. As president of the commission, I have the authority to direct you and all other staff of the commission, with certain exceptions. Despite receiving that direction from me, you proceeded to approve several pending decisions regarding hiring. You also failed to take any responsibility for your conduct that is mentioned in the SPB report. You did not apologize for violating civil service rules. You did not acknowledge the discredit your actions have brought to the CPUC. You expressed no concern for the affected candidates who participated in the hiring processes at issue or for the morale of the current CPUC employees. Instead, you repeatedly suggested that the commissioners should use our political influence to, in your words, make the SPB report go away. The commissioners took an oath to uphold the California Constitution, including the merit system rules, and your suggestion was abhorrent. Civil service is a merit-based system designed to protect government processes from undue political influence. It is also designed to ensure that we hire and promote a qualified workforce and not friends or favorites who have inferior qualifications than other candidates. It is our expectation that you, the person responsible for the administrative duties of the Commission, would take that requirement very seriously. You took the same oath to uphold the California Constitution as we all did. I now want to briefly address some accusations you have made regarding our motives for considering your dismissal. You have said that you believe the utilities have asked us to end your employment. That is absolutely not true. No commissioner has had any communication of any kind with anyone employed by the utilities regarding your employment. You have also asserted that the CPUC had $200 million in uncollected fees and fines, and that you are a whistleblower. Neither of these things is true. First, the CPUC did not have $200 million in uncollected fees. The report that you have cited, which was prepared by an outside consultant, does not say that. What the report says, and I'm quoting, is the total amount of outstanding collections was approximately $49.9 million as of December 31st, 2019. The report also states that approximately $21 million of that amount was due from activity in 2017 or earlier. But the report does not state that the CPUC was lax in attempting to collect the $21 million. In fact, $19.7 million of the amount consists of one fine to a single telecommunications company that was bankrupt and defunct at the time the fine was levied. The CPUC has been pursuing collections on that fine for years, including filing superior court actions. Likewise, other large portions of the $49.9 million in outstanding funds or are fines that utilities have appealed and which cannot be collected until the appeal is resolved. More importantly, as the executive director, it is your job to inform the Commission if you believe that fee collection needed to be improved, and your responsibility to implement improvements in the accounting processes and procedures. I note that the same report regarding uncollected funds states, and I quote, the CPUC has actively monitored and addressed issues brought up during our review and has already started to implement our suggested recommendations, end of quote. We relied on you and encouraged you to take all necessary steps to address and correct any deficiencies there were. None of us ever ignored or attempted to slow down or interfere with your work in any way. Finally, I want to make a point about the timing of the SPB investigation. It was in mid-August 2019 that the SPB notified the CPUC that it had opened this investigation. None of the commissioners were interviewed during that investigation. You were interviewed, though. The commissioners had no control over the content of the SPB report and first received a copy of it in June of 2020. Our consideration of your employment status today is based on the findings in the report. You took a series of actions over a course of several years that calls into question your integrity. Those actions, along with your conduct in reaction to and in response to the report findings, cause us to have to consider whether you can continue to serve as the leader of this agency. Thank you. Heracles, I turn this back to you.
Yes. Ms. Stebbins, you may now begin with your presentation.
Okay, Carl, are you on the line?
Carl Olson will go first.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Olson.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Olson, but we don't see you if you want to turn your video application on.
Okay, can you see me now?
Yes, we can see you and hear you. Thank you, Mr. Olson.
Thank you. The firing of Ms. Stebbins would be a clear case of retaliation against a whistleblower. Ms. Stebbins and her staff reported $200 million in uncollected revenue from the industries regulated by the PUC to President Batjer, who, along with Commissioner Shiroma, serves on the Audit Committee, starting in February and March of 2020. On May 15th of this year, and at other times, Bernard Azevedo made a detailed report about the $200 million in uncollected revenue. Among other things, the reports showed that the PUC collected only $21 million in accounts receivable in the 2018-19 fiscal year, and that as of June 30th, 2019, the PUC was owed over $200 million. This contradicts what the Commission claimed last week and has said today about how the $200 million was an exaggeration and that much of it was going to be collected. There was a final assessment of accounting practices given to the Commission in early June of 2020. Shortly thereafter these whistleblowing reports, in early July 2020, President Batjer lobbied the other commissioners in non-noticed serial meetings to fire Ms. Stebbins. You all agreed in serial private meetings to fire Ms. Stebbins. One of your texts was a smoking gun. Quote, I want to be very careful to make sure she understands we all agree. The texts you all have produced show an egregious violation of the Bagley-Keene Act, with each of the 5 commissioners texting each other day and night about firing Ms. Stebbins. On July 8th, Commissioner Randolph texted, quote, it's not tenable for her to stay. Her text said, quote, on the phone with MB, do you want to debrief or are you feeling done for the day, end quote. The response was, quote, no, happy to debrief. And, quote, I was just texting her. You texted her about how you needed to make clear that you had all agreed to fire Ms. Stebbins. You said, quote, it's not tenable for her to stay, end quote. Wrong. What's not tenable is to violate the state constitution, which you all took an oath to protect and defend. It provides that the meetings of public bodies should be open. The Bagley-Keene Act forbids serial meetings like this to arrive at a collective consensus, and that's exactly what you all have done in violation of Government Code Section 11125B. That law forbids the majority of members of a state body like the PUC from using, quote, a series of communications of any kind, directly or through intermediaries, to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item outside of duly noticed meetings. Your texting sessions weren't noticed meetings. Now, ignorance of the law is no excuse. But in the case of a commission populated by well-educated lawyers, it seems even worse. You probably know the law, and you consciously and brazenly defied it. Now, interestingly, President Batjer, you've denied any influence from outside industries, but you had a, quote, meet and greet in July, the month of the unlawful serial meetings, with Rhonda Johnson, the president of AT&T California, along with AT&T's assistant vice president for regulatory affairs. You had scheduled a meet and greet with PG&E's top executive in July and again on August 6th. You canceled it, I guess, under pressure, probably from the fact that we had already called you out for your unlawful conduct. And again, July is when you commissioners arrived at your consensus to fire Ms. Stebbins. Commissioners, as some of the public speakers have remarked, you waived a $200 million fine against PG&E, and you haven't collected another $200 million owed to the state. You're trying to blame it on Alice, and you're saying, oh, well, it was your job to collect it. But after she blew the whistle on it, you immediately launched into a collective consensus to fire her. You gave PG&E a second chance, and you waived a $200 million fine after it committed felonies that killed people. But you apparently don't want to give Alice Stebbins a second chance after the SPB questioned some of her hires, even though the HR department was involved in the hires and there's no rule against hiring people with whom you have worked before. That's letting a corporate criminal off the hook, but not giving a second chance to your executive director who had done a great job. Now back to the texts. Commissioner Randolph also texted about, quote, where this is ending up anyway. President Batjer, you texted, it's more than clearly apparent that it's untenable for her to stay working here, and we should be working from that. Another texted, I can't imagine her remaining. 4 of you 5 commissioners were texting each other to that effect on July 24th, 2020, again after the whistleblowing. Commissioners, again, you have clearly violated the Bagley-Keene Act. Section 11122.5b1 provides a majority of the members of a state body shall not, outside of a meeting authorized by this chapter, use a series of communications of any kind, directly or through intermediaries, to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item that is within the subject matter of the state body. And Section 11120 sets forth, quote, the intent of the law that actions of state agencies be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. The Commission has scoffed at that law and scoffed at Article 1, Section 3 of the California Constitution, which was adopted by an 83% vote of the people and which requires open meetings. You've conducted serial meetings at which you decided to fire Ms. Stebbins. You told her you'd made your decision to fire her. You made the decision in secret texting sessions which had not been noticed to Ms. Stebbins or the public. President Batjer, you told Ms. Stebbins that you and the other commissioners had decided to fire her if she didn't resign. Commissioners Rex, Staffen, and Randolph, you told her, and your texts reveal the same thing, and you texted and called her late on the evening of August 3rd to repeat that warning under cover of darkness. You asked Ms. Stebbins to call you, and when she did, you both told her you'd made up your mind you were going to fire her. There was and is no reason to fire Ms. Stebbins because the SPB report was contrived and unfounded and did not detract from the fact she had done an excellent job. She hired 800 people and was moving the PUC in the right direction. You all submitted a report to the legislature in June of 2020, the so-called decade document, touting the hiring and the direction in which Ms. Stebbins was moving the PUC. The SPB raised unfounded questions about 5 people who were doing an excellent job, including Mr. Azevedo, the individual who, along with Ms. Stebbins, blew the whistle on the commissioner's own failure to do anything to collect $200 million. And ironically, many of your texts admit that Ms. Stebbins had reasonable explanations for the hiring of most of the folks in question. If you go ahead with this firing, this kangaroo court in which President Batjer seems to be serving as prosecutor, judge, and jury, you will send a chilling message to whistleblowers in state service. People who report illegal and improper activity will be fired, and you will send a message that you operate the way the administration in Washington operates. If you try to regulate the industries you're supposed to regulate and hold them accountable, you'll be demonized and fired. What the Commission should be trying to do is to regulate PG&E before they start more fires and destroy more towns and commit another 85 felonies. You should be acting like Judge Alsup, who is presiding over the PG&E probation and holding their corporate feet to the fire. You should not be having meet and greets with these folks. Instead, you're spending all of your time trying to fire a dedicated public servant with 33 years of exemplary state service who hired people who are doing a good job. Please don't send such a chilling message to the public, to ratepayers, and state employees who are doing a good job trying to protect the public and regulate huge corporations like PG&E. Please give Ms. Stebbins a chance to finish the job that she was hired to do and to regulate the utilities. Thank you. Ms. Stebbins will now give her statement.
Ms. Stebbins.
Thanks, Arclese. CPUC management, staff, public speakers, listeners, and commissioners. First, a word of thanks to everyone who spoke today during the public comment period. I also want to acknowledge some of the great work from many of the staff at the CPUC. Continue to do good work and don't be persuaded to do anything less. As Mr. Azevedo, the former Deputy Executive Director of the CPUC Administrative Services Division, stated earlier, there is $200 million in accounts receivable at the CPUC. This essentially means that the industries we regulate owe us $200 million. I and my staff blew the whistle on this, and that's why I'm being fired. Here is the breakdown. $36.4 million is due to the general fund for fines the Commission has issued to its industries. $10.6 is due from transportation companies. $60.4 million is due from the gas, electric, water, and telecommunication industries. $62 million is due from the Lifeline program. $6.4 million is due from the Deaf and Disabled Telecommunications program. $10 million is due from the California Teleconnect Fund. This is money for schools and libraries. $7 million is due from the California Advanced Services Fund. This is money for broadband. $4.4 million is due from the High Cost Fund A. This is for money for communication services in rural areas. And $3.2 million is due from federal funding. The amounts total roughly $200.4 million. I was alerted to the $200 million accounts receivable in January 2020. I attempted to brief President Batjer in January and was finally able to brief her in February 2020. At the same briefing, I also alerted her to concerns with the Water Division and some irregularities with their collections. Collections that went back as far as 19 years, where small water companies were billing their customers, collecting the money, but failing to send the money to the CPUC, the same division that has never done an enforcement action. President Batjer was dismissive when I brought up the accounts receivable balance of $200 million, so I directed Mr. Azevedo to begin the process of identifying the entities who owed the CPUC monies and begin the collection process. Because the CPUC had done such a poor job with the accounting records, the process has been long and arduous, a process I had hoped to complete. As a frame of reference, accounts receivables are material when they have an economic impact to the agency. Another state agency with a similar size budget has an accounts receivable balance of $1.5 million. This is still a lot of money, but compared to $200 million is a small impact to this agency. It is also important to understand that the $200 million is heavily relying on utility self-reporting, essentially a system where the utilities are trusted to make payment without supervision or surveillance. This is not only high risk for payment failure, but a fiscal catastrophe and a mismanagement of resources, which is a perfect recipe for fraud and abuse. So let's get back to the numbers. Fiscal year 18-19 started with roughly $173 million in accounts receivable. This same year, there were roughly $53 million in new receivables. The CPUC collected about $22 million of the 73 owed, plus some adjustments. The ending balance of fiscal year 18-19 was $200 million. The theory with accruals is that you know who owes you money, how much, and they are supposed to pay in the year they are created. However, that has never happened at the CPUC, as far as I can tell. In many cases, I don't know who owes, how much they owe, and if they have paid. It is entirely possible the CPUC is providing utilities an interest-free line of credit. It is untenable to have $200 million in accounts receivable. Mr. Azevedo and I also realized that there were no reconciliations occurring between program databases and the accounting office. Accounting was relying heavily on the industry division. Again, from a fiduciary responsibility standpoint, this is fraught with internal control issues, as well as a complete lack of separation of duties. This was not something my predecessors focused on, but one that was recognizable to the strong individuals I hired through the competitive process. This was also a massive liability to the CPUC and showed a lack of fiscal responsibility and integrity. In fact, Mr. Azevedo offered the high-level accounting assessment dated July 2019 to the internal auditor. However, internal audits refused to accept the report. This makes no sense. This is an area the CPUC's internal audit unit should have focused on like a laser. In November 2019, I asked President Batjer that I be included in the audit and finance meetings with the internal auditor, since I had a lot to share. And there were areas on which I was hoping the internal audit team could assist. President Batjer denied my request. She seemed to mistrust my good judgment approach to business and was already excluding me from meetings that, as the executive director, I could have provided insight, feedback, and perspective. And in the case of the $200 million, a plan to remediate. What did President Batjer not want me to know? Prior to President Batjer starting at the CPUC, I had support to begin several programmatic reviews. Those included, but are not limited to, an assessment of the accounting processes and services, an assessment of the water division, an assessment of the deaf and disabled program, an audit of the electric program investment charge, a $500 million program, various audits and assessments of the Lifeline program, audits of balancing accounts, a priority workload assessment for all divisions, an assessment of the IT infrastructure conducted by the California Department of Technology. The Human Resources Review is not on my list. That HR review was created by President Batjer in an effort to destroy hardworking and outstanding employees who are making a difference. And please note, I have hired organizationally over 800 individuals in 2.5 years. Why only focus on 5 individuals? The same 5 individuals who have assisted me and many others in fixing a broken CPUC, which includes discovering $200 million in accounts receivable. As I read this, I have been told by the commissioners, and it is clear in their text messages between themselves, the outcome of this hearing. President Batjer and Commissioner Rechtschaffen and Commissioner Randolph have told me they have made up their minds to fire me before there was even a notice meeting or hearing. Here's the timeline. The State Personnel Board began an HR review in October of 2019. I am alerted to the $200 million in January 2020. I briefed President Batjer in February 2020 on the $200 million. In April 2020, I received a call from 2 investigators questioning 5 hires I have made, which was allegedly discovered during the HR review. On June 24th, I am contacted by an attorney from the Attorney General's office about the investigation, and she shares with me the draft investigative report stating I have until July 1st to complete my response. I request an extension to July 13th, which is finally granted. On July 8th and July 11th, the commissioners text each other that I cannot stay at the CPUC, which shows clearly that they had already made up their mind. They all agree I need to go. On July 13th, I provide my reply to the June 24th SPB investigative report. The commissioners' text messages are a blatant violation of the Bagley-Keene open meeting law, and the commissioners had already decided to get rid of me before they had even read my reply to the report. I know without a doubt that they had to get rid of me because I blew the whistle on the $200 million. They asked for my resignation, and they said I would be fired if I did not resign. I'm here today because I did not resign. Resigning would have admitted to a wrongdoing. But I say to you all today, the only wrongdoing was by President Batjer and the commissioners to try and cover up the $200 million, as well as all the other areas my team is cleaning up. The State Personnel Board investigation is seriously flawed. The same report that was sent to all CPUC staff on Monday, August 10th, with no warning or heads up to all the individuals mentioned in the report. My reply was not included in that response, but I will share with you today the many inconsistencies in the report, as well as the real reason behind the SPB investigation. The investigators did not know, nor were they interested in learning, that the entirety of the CPUC was in a massive turmoil, and the operations were highly inefficient when I arrived. The decade document prepared for the legislature by my team reveals the turmoil and dysfunction at the CPUC, as well as the massive improvement in hiring practices and other areas under my watch. We were a siloed operation where every industry had different processes and procedures, or none at all. I was hired to correct this. In the first year, recruiting individuals to come to the CPUC from other organizations was extremely difficult. In many cases, we had to re-advertise jobs, change classifications, and invigorate our recruitment efforts to get better candidates to apply. Conditions improved when we began advertising and recruiting in Sacramento. However, Public Utilities Research Analyst, otherwise known as PUROs, was not a classification that any Sacramento agency and their staff were familiar with, as it was only used at the CPUC in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Many of the most qualified candidates across the state did not even know the PURO classification existed. As such, marketing efforts were undertaken to describe the work experience needed that qualified for these classifications, in addition to what the CPUC had to offer from a career perspective. Even through these efforts, the candidate pool remained disappointing. So we tried to enlarge the candidate pool by including the option of training and development opportunities. This is a standard recruitment technique used at many state agencies, along with fellowships, student assistance, and targeted outreach. Training and development assignments were found to be very helpful and allowed us to recruit staff that were skilled and analytical, but who may not have had all the utility-related experience required by the classification. The CPUC began adding will accept T&Ds to many of its PURA advertisements to entice individuals who may not have been eligible to apply for a position otherwise. My executive team in San Francisco were working hard and helped me. Yet despite this, the progress was slow. We were all working long hours, but I still needed staff. The team I hired, along with others, helped me shape many of the reforms and changes needed at the CPUC that were demanded by the public, the legislature, and the governor, changes that many Californians have benefited from. I commend the division staff who continue to work hard and really adapt and change with the direction I was providing. However, all this changed in August 2019. In August 2019, Marybel Batjer became president of the CPUC. At the outset, I provided President Batjer with an update on pending audits related to fiscal integrity issues. I made her aware of the Schoberg and Evanshank draft report, which had been issued in July 2019, which found that significant risk exists in CPU's handling of accounts receivable. Ms. Batjer showed no interest in that work. Rather, she seemed fixated on personnel issues, with particular attention to how she could move more control to her office of her key divisions. I knew that the State Personnel Board was starting its audit, which was something that happened every 3 years, and thought nothing of it at the time. I focused on continuing to fix the CPUC, and especially overseeing staff projects that would root out the lack of process and procedures in each division. I was also working hard to address concerns about the CPUC's responsiveness to wildfire safety issues, as many of the speakers today have noted. I briefed President Batjer and other commissioners on the $200 million in February 2020, and I did my level best to bring attention to this serious problem. In April 2020, I received a call from 2 SPB investigators, and I spent about an hour and a half on the phone with those individuals. I was never asked to review any writings or reports or to provide any information beyond the oral interview. Again, I and my staff remain focused on the business of the CPUC. The final assessment of accounting processes report was issued in early June 2020, and it disclosed, among other things, the CPUC's noncompliance with the State Administrative Manual, significant risk in CPUC's oversight and management of federal funds, and the CPUC's handling of unpaid accounts receivable, including approximately $200 million reported to the state controller that was due to the CPUC from private utility companies as of June 30th, 2019, with a significant portion of these accounts receivables dating back many years. 3 weeks later, I received a draft final copy of the SPB report on June 24th, 2020. I was truly shocked. It was incomplete, inaccurate, and contained a number of flat-out false statements. However, the claim was that I had improperly hired 5 senior staff employees, and I had no doubt that it was a simple matter of demonstrating from the actual records of their hiring that these persons were, 1, competitive and well qualified for the position they each applied to, B, or 2, that as compared to the other candidates, each was equal to or better than the candidates. 3, that I had properly exercised my discretion to hire the most qualified person for each position. And 4, that each of these employees had exemplary performances since coming over to the CPUC. Also, I was well aware that I was permitted to hire people who I had worked with at other agencies. One thing stood out to me, the numbers in the report. Since starting at the CPUC, I had oversight of over 800 hires and personally interviewed or was consulted in a high percentage of these. I had opened the Sacramento CPUC office and overseen countless hires for that office. Out of all these interviews and hiring decisions, why would an audit focus on 5 employees? all of whom were experienced, well qualified, and by any objective standard, and competitive with the other candidates. The bottom line is that the SPB investigation and report is deeply flawed and inaccurate, as I pointed out in several rebuttals, which the commissioners did not see fit to provide to the SPB. Within days, it all began to come into focus. President Batjer convinced other commissioners who just months earlier had told me I was doing a great job, that I needed to resign immediately before the report became public. When I tried to explain why the report was not accurate, I was accused of being defensive, unduly offended, and I just needed to start packing my bag. I knew that President Batjer had close connections to the SPB. She had oversight of that agency in her prior job. I had not realized until this moment that she would actually exercise improper influence over a state audit. I started to realize that this was no routine report. It was not a random investigation. It was very targeted. Who was out to destroy my career and why? The real reason I'm being fired is that I blew the whistle on the uncollected $200 million. I emphasized to President Batjer and your audit committee that we had a problem and that I had evidence of mismanagement in the water division and was continuing to gather additional details in other industries. I made these reports in February and March 2020. On my approval, Mr. Azevedo also reported this to President Batjer and the audit committee in a May 15, 2020 letter, with attachments that included an accounting assessment that identified again the high risk of the accounts receivable. The audit committee once again turned a blind eye to missing $200 million, and the commissioners rather turned all of their attention to firing me. During this entire time, the audit committee kept accounting from working on the $200 million by sending an internal auditing staff who were focused on the de minimis items compared to the outrageous $200 million accounts receivable that had been found. Internal audits have been checking parking receipts of directors rather than millions of dollars in uncollected accounts receivable. This was President Batjer's tactic to distract and intimidate the staff so they were unable to focus on the real and necessary work. She was sending a strong message that her way was the only way. President Batjer targeted me and my staff for removal because we did not stop in our efforts to make change for the better by collecting $200 million and by fixing so many other legacy issues. Returning the CPUC in its old corrupt ways with total power in the hands of the president and no meaningful regulation of the utilities like PG&E is the singular goal of President Batjer. The ratepayers, legislature, and governor deserve a CPUC that regulates responsibly and attempts to hold powerful utilities accountable. Most of the public see the CPUC as a bureaucracy. A great example of a bureaucracy is DMV. Lots of steps and slow. President Batjer wants the CPUC to be a bureaucracy versus a well-functioning organization that is accountable but still moves quickly and efficiently. I wanted an organization that was fiscally strong and accountable. The fiscal team in any organization is vital to ensure accounts are set up and monitored responsibly. Accounts are reconciled and billed, and the agency follows generally accepted accounting principles and governmental accounting standards. The financial office in an organization is critical. If your fiscal records are being done poorly, it is a strong indicator that the organization has severe weaknesses. I hope all of you listening are still paying attention, but please do not let President Batjer and the rest of the commission ignore the fiscal integrity of the most powerful organization in the state of California. Ratepayers count on us to hold utilities accountable. They count on us to do our jobs. I do not believe and have never believed in not being accountable. I don't accept business as usual. And I question processes and procedures, especially when they don't exist. You all deserve a CPUC that is well run, collects $200 million that is owed, and holds the utilities accountable. I wish I would have had, and I still hope I will have, the chance to finish the good work my staff and I had begun. But I and the public have seen your text, and it is apparent that you have made your decision and rendered your judgment before this trial started. If and when you formalize the decision your texts have already revealed, you will have removed the teeth from the agency, which is supposed to be a watchdog over the utilities. In summary, I was hired to make the CPUC a better organization. I was on my way to doing this before I was targeted because my team and I discovered $200 million in accounts receivable. I ask that I be allowed to continue the good work my staff and I have done. At this time, I'll turn it over to Therese.
Thank you, Ms. Stebbins. Ms. Therese?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Great. I don't think I have audio, rather a video. Is that right? I can't seem to get it to work under Apple, I guess is the problem, right?
We don't see you, but we can hear you.
Very good. Thank you. And I will get going. I know you guys have had a long morning. And I will also try not to repeat, but I do want to wrap up where we've been. Some people come to work for our state agencies because they just want a comfortable job and a good paycheck. Some people come out of a sense of duty and a commitment to good governance. And for those brave souls who agree to take on positions of management and leadership, at least in government jobs, they sometimes do so at risk of their careers because to speak up has consequences and because change in any organization is hard. Executive Director Alice Stebbins has worked in state government for over 30 years, and as in those roles, both as in startup positions and as she gathered experience and moved to management, she gained the experience and knowledge. She translated her desire for change and better accountability into concrete action items. She learned how to become an effective agent of change, and that has been her reputation. That was her reputation at the California Air Resources Board. It has been her reputation at the California PUC. It is the reason why she was recruited to the California PUC to apply for the position as executive director, because they were looking for someone who had the experience, the courage, and the ability to effect change. She has worked tirelessly in her short time, and she has only been there since 2018, but in that short time, she has worked tirelessly to implement change, and she believed and was told that she had the support of leadership. Indeed, she was told when President Batjer came to the PUC that she had the support of leadership to continue making those changes. She did not know until literally weeks ago that she did not have the support to make change. Now, I know you've heard from two former staff persons from the California Air Resources Board, and I think those people can best be summarized as people who objected to change or changing in their organization. Their stories, should they ever be called upon to be witnesses in any further proceedings, would have to acknowledge that they did things that were unconscionable, such as hiring relatives for positions, daughters, boyfriends, nieces, nephews, and that those persons also had performance issues that had to be addressed inside of their own departments. And so two people out of the hundreds and hundreds of people that Executive Director Stebbins has worked with came forward today. Many other people came forward to talk about the manner in which she has worked with integrity, with experience, with knowledge, with hard work, with commitment. I want to address three things as we conclude this. First of all, whether there is a there on the $200 million in uncollected accounts receivable. The report, the final audit of this accounting report, which was released in June of 2020, was in draft form in July of 2019, and it identified at that time significant risk in the CPUC's handling of accounts receivables. However, as you read that report, you must align it with the report to the State Controller's Office, which identifies the particulars. It unpacks what those problems are. And in that report, which in the report released to the State Controller's Office, it shows $200 million of accounts receivable due as of June 30th, 2019. Of this, $50 million has been past due and outstanding since 2017, with portions dating back as far as the 1990s. The $50 million is a material amount that triggers a violation of state regulations. The collection of this $50 million should have been actively pursued by President Batjer and the commissioners, and certainly addressed by the audit committee in order to remain in compliance with State Administrative Manual sections 8776 and 8776.6. So there is a there. It's significant, and it cannot be understated or passed away or swept under a carpet. And it was reported not only was it identified, but it was reported in February of 2020. And what Ms. Stebbins and others, including Mr. Azevedo, were trying to do was unpack it to say, okay, this is exactly what's inside of this box of $200 million of accounts receivables. Largely because of President Batjer's improper influence over the audit process, the SPB report is not credible. And what's even more important is that you, the commissioners, made no effort to correct false and inaccurate information from the draft to the comments to the final. You receive a draft on June 24th, 2020. You have an opportunity in July to correct inaccuracies until it gets to final. But you made no effort to do that. You made a passing effort to read over Ms. Stebbins' comments, but you made no effort to correct the inaccuracies. And I think it's because you wanted this to be a firing defense. The report, if you look at it, narrowly confined its analysis to a carefully selected set of facts intended to create false images and innuendos about an allegedly improper hiring practice or practices. But the math doesn't work for this thing. This report fails to consider the vast number of hires, over 800 hires for the prior 2-year period. And of that, 5 individuals may have had some issue in the hiring process. Nor does it consider at all that Ms. Stebbins, that these 5 individuals were in fact qualified. And objectively, looking at their resumes, looking at their experience, and looking at the other candidates, and looking at the job description, they were objectively qualified by any standard. Further, this report failed to interview them, and further, this report failed, and the commission has failed to identify how any of these 5 individuals were not qualified or did not perform exemplary. What on earth did they not do that they were supposed to do except support Ms. Stebbins in her efforts to make the CPUC more fiscally accountable, because that is where she focused most of her work, to bring in procedures and process and fiscal integrity. The report at best raised concerns that could have been objectively discussed with Ms. Stebbins and the HR department. But that was not its purpose nor its point. It was a pretext for stopping Ms. Stebbins and her very well-qualified senior staff from doing their work, from cleaning up the CPUC, to rid it of fiscally irresponsible practices and to implement policies and procedures that would create transparency, fiscal integrity, and accountability. President Batjer and the CPUC commissioners, I respectfully ask that you take a deep breath, slow this down, look at what is really happening. Asking Executive Director Stebbins to leave because you have concerns about the hiring process of 5 employees out of 800 over the past 2 years, and these employees who are objectively qualified and have performed their jobs at the CPUC in an exemplary manner is not the right path. Indeed, I've heard that you've threatened each of these employees with termination in the coming days. Firing Ms. Stebbins is regressive and an unwise move. It will return the CPUC to a stagnant, ineffective state organization that has drawn so much criticism in the past. This is not the right path for the CPUC. I urge you to reconsider and retain Executive Director Stebbins. Let her get back to work and make change for the better. And if you want her to be, if you want oversight of hiring practices or more, work effectively with HR and with Ms. Stebbins to make those changes, which would be modest in their nature. I thank you for your time and consideration today.
Ms. Stebbins, does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. I now turn it over to President.
Thank you, Heracles, and thank you, Ms. Stebbins and Council, for your presentation. Moving on in our agenda, management reports and commissioner reports. There is no management report nor commissioner report today. We will now recess the public meeting to discuss items in the closed session. We will reconvene the public meeting after our discussion in closed session. There will be a slide on the website to indicate that the Commission is in recess for closed session. We will update that slide to include an approximate time, about 15 minutes out, before reconvening the public meeting. Our news and outreach team will also send out a tweet to alert followers of the expected time we will reconvene the public meeting. We will now go into closed session on legal matters. Thank you, operator. We are reconvening in the public session. Will the agenda clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Sharoma? Present. Commissioner Guzman-Aceves? Here. Commissioner Randolph? Here. Commissioner Rechtschaffen?
Present.
President Batjer?
Here. Thank you. The quorum has been established. I would like to apologize to the public for the technical difficulty that we are having on our telephone lines. We have worked to try and resolve it. I do apologize to you that have been waiting and that have been having difficulties getting on the line. We have quite a few people who have waited for over 30 minutes. So we're going to endeavor to continue. And this has been recorded. This is going to be recorded, so it will be available through our offices to listen to what is going to be said here. So again, I apologize for the technical difficulties that we're having with our telephone lines. We met as a commission in closed session and deliberated and considered the dismissal of the executive director of the CPUC. Pursuant to Government Code 11125.2 and Government Code 11126.3F, a vote was taken to dismiss the Executive Director, Alice Stebbins, effective September 4th, 2020. The roll call vote was as follows. Commissioner Sharoma, yes. Commissioner Guzman-Aceves, yes. Mr. Rechtschaffen, yes. Commissioner Randolph, yes. President Batjer, yes. The Commission will also report out this action at a subsequent meeting of the CPUC on September 10th, 2020. Thank you all for attending this public meeting today. We are now adjourned.